for just one sec, Henry, and then
Of
we'll.
course. Of course, I don't mind.
Uh, Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second IASI webinar. Um, I'm Blue Martin, the new chair of IASI, and thanks very much indeed for tuning in to this edition of the webinar series. So I decided to run a session on avalanche safety for two reasons. Firstly, training in this area comes relatively late in the instructor pathway. The first formal module, level one off-piste security, is actually part of level three, and that's long after most instructors actually start skiing or riding off-piste. But the second reason is that I have a personal interest. I've been involved in three avalanches. I've been into and set off one. And although I wasn't buried or even injured in that first one, the experience of realizing that I might be about to die started me on my educational journey in terms of avalanche safety. But being involved in two more perfectly illustrates that education and training alone aren't enough. You have to actually apply what you know, even when you're looking at the most tempting untracked powder field. And this is where the first part of today's webinar comes in. So I'd like to introduce our two speakers. Henry Schniewind is an internationally recognised snow and avalanche expert. He first trained in avalanche forecasting during his geology studies at Montana State and Boston universities, and he's been based in the French Alps in Val d'Isère for over 30 seasons, where he works as an off-piste ski guide and directs Henry's Avalanche Talk, which is an avalanche education program he founded to address the fact that most avalanche victims trigger the slide themselves. Henry's delivered more than 900 avalanche safety talks and courses. He's spoken at international snow science conferences, published widely in the press. He's a professional member of the American Avalanche Association, and Henry's Avalanche Talk is also endorsed by the French Avalanche Association, which credits Henry with helping to save well over 100 lives through his long-running avalanche awareness and accident prevention work. So, welcome, Henry. Thanks so much for
Thanks very
joining.
much. Welcome, everybody. I'm honored to be here with you this evening.
And our second speaker is Dominique Perret, who's a legendary freeride skier turned leading mountain safety advocate. After a pioneering career that saw him set world records, produce more than 28 ski films, and earn the title Best Freeride Skier of the Century, Dom has shifted his focus to avalanche safety. So in 2014, he founded the International Snow Training Academy, which is the first program to standardize global avalanche awareness and mountain safety education. But now he's the co-founder and the driving force behind We Mountain, which is an initiative dedicated to equipping skiers, riders, resorts, and mountain communities with the skills and responsibility needed to enjoy the mountains safely. So I'm very proud that IASI is hosting not just one, but two of the biggest names in the avalanche safety business. And as a reflection of the value this talk will have, we at IASI have decided to recognise it as a one-year CPD for our members. So if anyone who's an IASI member wants attendance of this webinar to count as their CPD, please make sure you watch the whole talk and we'll conduct a short test at the end to validate your attendance. And then we'll do the €11 admin fee by email afterwards. Okay, over to Henry. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Blue. And I will share my presentation here. Let's see. Well, first of all, as many of you probably know, there's snow in the Alps now, and there's more coming. This is one of the best starts to the season that we've had in many years, up there with the best in decades. So the theme of the talk, of my part of the talk this evening, is where do I start? Where do I begin if I'm just beginning to get into off-piste and touring? And also, if I've done avalanche courses and things, where do I start in applying what I've learned? And the three key things that I'm going to focus on this evening are the slope angles, terrain traps, essential race rescue equipment, and training. And these are three points of an overall 9-point method pocket guide that I've created, or a framework that has divided up into three categories of decision making, where you go decision making, how you go risk reduction, and what you do in crisis management. And it's really aimed at being a complement to avalanche courses. And so the next point that I really wanted to make is that there's tons and tons of information, even on my more refined method and framework. And so it's really important to remember as you hear about this information or hear it for the second or third time, you don't have to be perfect. And the main thing is that you're really consciously trying to apply. You and your group are trying to apply the safety points. So the structure of the talk, of my part of the talk, is first of all looking at the problem. Is it acceptably safe? And because what we want to do is look at what the problem is so that we can try and solve it. And the solution is applying a framework, human factors, and teamwork. And of course, the problem is the avalanche problem and avalanche accident problem. And what we're looking at is a solution for reducing accidents. So the first part is is it safe or is it acceptably safe? That's kind of the thing we all want to know. Is it safe to go out today? Is it safe to go over here or there? And so what I've done for this part is we're going to look first at the concrete sides of the problem, which is knowing where the secured areas end and the unsecured areas begin. 9 times out of 10, 15 minutes to live if you're buried. And then the not so concrete human factors that surround the fact that nothing happens most of the time, even if you or other people are doing something that could be said to be reckless. And also, after the accident happens, most of the time, people are saying that, well, they really should have known better. So the first part of the problem, what we're going to look at is is knowing where the secured areas end and the unsecured areas begin. And then we'll look at 9 times out of 10 and 15 minutes to live if you're buried. So wherever you go, you need to know exactly where the secured areas end and the unsecured areas begin. Because once you get into the unsecured areas, that's where you need to take responsibility for your own safety, and that of the group too, be a team player. And this in Europe, where most of you ski, the secured areas end on the other side, outside of the marked runs. Literally, just on the other side is where the unsecured areas are, and you need to take responsibility for your own safety. We were just talking before we came on that this catches out a lot of Americans. There's a very different system there, where there's out of bounds, and many of you are aware of that. Out of bounds, inbounds, and a lot of Americans are a bit naive, like I was when I first got over here. But we're going to focus here on the most European resorts. This is what the secured and unsecured areas look like. It's that dramatic, and even if you're close to the piste, you need to really remember that you're going into unsecured areas and take responsibility for your safety and apply the points that we're going to look at this evening. 9 times out of 10, or even 95% of the time, according to more recent um, data, the victim triggers the avalanche themselves. So this is kind of good news because that means we can do something about it. Also, 9 times out of 10, or even more, it is a slab avalanche that's involved. It's actually a cold, dry, accidental slab avalanche. Accidental means it's been triggered by the person. Natural means it came down on itself, and artificial is that when Peace Patrol have triggered it. And you will have noticed that there are other things that look dangerous and are dangerous at times, but they don't really come into the accident reduction problem. Things like this, what we call glide cracks, or even wet snow avalanches. And these are things that you can look into and as you further your education, but they're not part of the accident reduction problem per se, because they only make up about a tiny percentage of accidents, especially where deaths are concerned. And that's most probably because the general rule of avoiding steep slopes when there's a rapid rise in temperature, especially if it goes up above freezing, and especially just after a snowstorm, that's generally known and generally applied and predictable. And further on where accidents happen and the problem, where slab avalanches that are triggered by victims most of the time on unsecured areas is about 70% are on the northish side of the mountain. And even more specifically, according to a French Avalanche Association study here, this is what it looks like where most accidents happen. Contrary to popular belief, it's mostly in the northish side of the mountain where accidents occur. And the majority of the accidents happen in December, January, and February. And Blue and I were discussing the other day, that's most probably because that's where the best snow is. But it also is where most of the instability exists. And for reasons why that is the case, join us in January for my talk on in-depth talk on triggering, how, where, why, and why not avalanches are really triggered. So in summary here for this part, the 9 out of 10 times we're looking at cold, dry slab avalanches that looks like great snow and very fine, safe, not really threatening. But the problem is once you trigger it, if you trigger it, you're in it, you can't get out. And if you're buried, everything stops. You're helpless. You'll see a little bit of light above, and you're completely dependent on your mates above you, even if you're only buried under a little bit of snow. Like my friend Fred Foxon here. So this person's alive, and that's thanks to him and his friends having the equipment, but also practiced with it in the days before this accident happened. And so here is a testimony from a young woman who was taken in an avalanche, and she graphically tells the way what it felt like to be underneath. Rihanna survived an avalanche. She was under the snow for about 15 minutes, about 2 feet of snow, so it's about 60 centimeters of snow. And none of you had transceivers or shovel or pro pole, huh?
Nothing.
It was 6 of you?
Six of us.
Can you tell us for what it was like to be underneath the snow?
It's absolutely horrendous. I don't recommend it. It was 6 of us off skiing and snowboarding, me and one other skier, and I got trapped in an avalanche, taken about 100, 150 meters down the slope. It was buried about 2 feet, and I had no equipment on me, they had no equipment on them, and at first they thought I'd skied off, and I was frozen under the snow in this position, and you can't move. It's like concrete. It's, as someone said, up to 900 kilos on top of you weight, and you just cannot budge it. And I was frozen there, and they were ringing my phone, and I couldn't answer it, and I was screaming, and they couldn't hear me. And I was just there, and after about 5 minutes, I lost consciousness. I had grade 1 hypothermia as well, it later turned out. And basically, by randomly spreading out, they just were poking in the snow with their hands, their snowboards, their skis, and someone of my friends randomly found the back of my leg as a neon pink salopette, and they dug me out, and I wasn't breathing, and I didn't find a pulse, and one of them started giving me CPR, and it worked, and then I was flown by helicopter to hospital, so not fun.
So what kinds of advice would you give to people in terms of equipment and things like that, and other advice?
Have equipment. It's just so not worth your life. The airbag is so important, but also to be carrying a transceiver. Like, I was so unbelievably lucky, but if I'd had a transceiver on, my friends would have found me within about 5 minutes, and it wouldn't have actually been that I sort of was reincarnated. It would have just been a horrible experience, not death.
And the shovel and probe pole.
Shovel and probe as well. I mean, again, they were digging me out with hands and snowboards and ski poles, and they were probing for me with ski poles and snowboards, and it's not really the ideal stuff. So have an av pack with a shovel, a probe, a transceiver, and have an airbag as well. It's so worth it.
All right, thanks very much.
No worries.
So I'm not sure if any of you picked up on Rihanna there said that she was reincarnated, which I thought was quite interesting. So secured and unsecured areas, know where the secured areas end and the unsecured areas begin, because that's where you have to take responsibility for your own safety once you get into the unsecured areas. 9 times out of 10, or even 95% of the time, it's the victim that triggers the avalanche, and it's a cold, dry slab avalanche that's involved. And if you're taken in and buried, you have about 15 minutes to live. And those are the concrete points. And then these next two in black, I've put them in black bullet points because I think they're the most dangerous. And they have to do with human factors and the fact that most of the time, even when it's really unstable, nothing happens, even if you're doing sort of the wrong thing and the most dangerous things. And then if an accident does happen, sadly, the victims, they should have known better and they probably did know better, but they weren't applying their knowledge and their experience. So first of all, the nothing happens, and then we'll look at they should have known better. Just two quick little examples. So nothing happens most of the time. And so we get complacent we stop applying the safety points that work that we're going to look at in a minute in the solution and the framework. And just to give you an example, we are very easily drawn in to the false security that there's tracks on a slope or there's people on a slope. And that's something that even me after like 35 seasons, I have to resist that unconscious kind of quick, impulsive um, green light motivation to go in because it feels safer, because there's tracks or there's people there. And in fact, in most accidents, there's two-thirds of all avalanche accidents, there were tracks on the slope or nearby. And so in those types of situations, people weren't applying, obviously, the key points that can help you to avoid being injured or killed in an avalanche. And then afterwards, generally, after an accident happens, people say that they should have known that better because there were clear signs of danger. And generally, the people who were taken did have enough experience and training to have been able to recognize these signs of danger, but they didn't take them into consideration. Just like I didn't in this occasion here. I was skiing a slope with some friends of mine and triggered a massive avalanche that I was documented on video, which was at that time I was known as the avalanche educator in the general area where I lived here in the Alps. And then after that I was known as the avalanche maker, which is a dubious reputation to have, of course, if you're in my situation as someone who's supposed to be an avalanche educator and helping people to avoid these types of situations and to make these types of situations. And to make matters even worse, the guy who did the video, he sold his National Geographic. So this just goes to show, and especially for all of you out there as aspiring instructors, no matter how much education and awareness you have, you're always going to be vulnerable to going out and letting passion or other instinctive impulses get the better of you. It's something you're always going to be struggling with. And so that is a summary of the problem. And so what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at the solution and how I came up with the framework. And it started really as a research-based thing, and it started within the entire international avalanche safety community. There was a person named Ian McCammon who was a behavioral scientist and avalanche expert. He's not the only behavioral scientist and avalanche expert, and there's lots of people who've done studies on human factors and how they've led even the most experienced and competent people into making deadly mistakes. But he was the first one to really do a scientific study, academic, credible scientific study on what were really the main reasons why people were getting into accidents. And it was based on around 700 accidents or so in the United States. And in some, what he came up with was the problem is really not people not applying their experience, knowledge, and due to human factors. Because, as I said before, they should have known better, but the most victims did know better. They did know better, but they just weren't applying their experience and their knowledge. So in very simple terms, accidents are generally people not applying the basics, and the basics that they really knew about because they'd done courses with me or done courses with Dom or any one of the many, many avalanche courses and avalanche training that exists out there. So what Ian, his conclusion was, and it's the same conclusion in other areas like aviation and military, is that in these kinds of risk contexts, that off-piste and touring and the avalanche and the avalanche context and avalanche terrain, you need simply applied decision tools, and luckily they don't need to be perfect to save lives. And I would go so far as to say is they need to be actually kind of imperfect and maybe overly simplified, so people actually do apply them. And an example is this right here. Just instructions to look in the direction that you should be looking on where traffic is coming from. It's not a long instruction sort of sign or booklet that's saying that when you go to countries where people drive on the other side of the road that you're used to, you should check out which direction they're coming from and measure the velocity that they're coming from, so that you can calculate when you go across. No, it's just simply look right, and that saved lots of lives. And it's not just the general public and ignorant Yanks like me when I go to the UK. I'm living in France, going to the UK, and look the wrong way and almost kill myself because I'm not really paying attention. Even people like experienced people like surgeons like Atul Gawande here, who wrote the Checklist Manifesto. It's a book, but he also is the author of the WHO World Health Organization Surgical Safety Checklist, which is one page to help really well intelligent people like doctors and surgical teams not do stupid things like do an operation on the wrong leg or the wrong arm or the wrong place on someone's body. This is called patient safety, and it happens so often that that one page World Health Organization surgical safety checklist is required throughout the world, and especially in Europe and the United States, before every operation that's done. So, with all of this in mind, we're going to just look briefly at the framework that comes under these different steps in my accident reduction framework, where you go, and decision making. A lot of decision making around avalanche in avalanche terrain is around choosing if you're going to go into it or not. And that is around slope angles, and we have danger levels and bulletins that are important to look at. Recent avalanche activity is all part of the decision-making process. Risk reduction, starting with terrain traps, keeping distances in the group so you don't put too much weight in any particular place, or safe for zones, keeping people exposed as little as possible once you're in avalanche terrain. Essential rescue equipment and training and human factors. But this is the entire framework, and I've offered a discount for those who want to get it in the safety pack. Blue's is gonna show you how you can obtain that. And for the rest of the talk here, what I'm really going to focus on is just the top line points of the slope angles, terrain traps, and essential rescue equipment. And these have the most impact of all the other points. Of course, it's not going to be the complete picture of avalanche safety, but it'll help you go a long way in at least knowing where to start. Where to start if you're just getting into the subject, or where to start even though it's just a refresher for you right now. It's the beginning of the season. These are the places where you want to start your decision making and your attempts at and assuring accident reduction. So to start with slope angles, we start with a 30 degree threshold. And why 30 degrees? It's because below 30 degrees, below 30 degree slopes, you're not going to be able to trigger an avalanche that releases and has any consequence to you or me. And 30 degrees is like a steep red run to black run kind of steepness. Of course, we're talking about off-piste and unsecured areas, but that gives you a reference point. So 30 degrees is really steep. So it's steep slopes. It's on steep slopes that avalanches release from. But but you can trigger them from below, and that's really important to always be keeping an eye above you, even if you're on shallow slopes and if there's steep slopes above you. And this is the Swiss Avalanche Institute has this great little um, cartoon sort of animation here that demonstrates that. And so how can you know about these 30-degree slope angles and measure them and assess them? There's different applications that you can get and apply. I think one of the best ones that I prefer to use is maps, like Ordnance Survey type maps. In France, they call them IGN. I forget what the word is in Switzerland, but I'm sure Dom and Blue will be able to make you aware of that. And these layovers that show you the different slope angles in the areas that you're thinking of going into before you go in there is really, really useful, especially if you're going on a ski tour. And it's really important, so important. I wrote an article about this, that knowing when you are going into avalanche terrain, and avalanche terrain, of course, is areas where there's 30-degree slopes above you, around you, or below you. But you can also keep out of avalanche terrain. And that's really that distinction is really important as a first step, and a great place to start with avalanche safety and accident reduction. And in fact, you can avoid the whole problem altogether in choosing terrain that's less than 30 degrees. And so here's a quick video that summarizes measuring with your poles, for example.
We found that the easiest way to get a reference point on a slope of 30 degrees is to make a triangle, an equilateral triangle like this right here in this image. So in order to do this, the first thing you do is make a trace in the snow with one pole like you see in the foreground. And then you take the tip of one pole and put it at the top of the trace, and the tip of the other pole and put it at the bottom of the trace. And if the downhill pole is leaning towards the slope, like right here, it's less than 30 degrees. Also in this image right here, it's a little bit less than 30 degrees. And note that this is a snowboarder, so snowboarders, you can take poles with you too. It helps to push along the flats. If the pole is straight up and down like right here, then you're at 30 degrees. And if it's leaning over the slope like right here, it's more than 30 degrees. So this is a really good way of measuring slopes and getting a pretty close idea of what that 30-degree reference point is. And remember that you can have a lot of fun on slopes below 30 degrees. It's pretty steep, part of a red run to black run steepness. And if you're skiing in an area where there's no slopes of 30 degrees above you that you're on or below you, you can have an enormous amount of fun in a no-risk area, risk avoidance area. So thanks very much for your attention. Have fun and be safe.
And so I emphasize this over and over again, partially to help convince myself and that you can have tons of fun in areas that are outside of the risk areas. And I always start my days, especially after fresh snowfall, always in these low-hanging fruit areas. I go for the easy stuff, and that gives me the time to assess the other key points in the accident reduction framework. And it also helps to get rid of that powder frenzy that has been building up before you get out onto the slopes. So another reason, even if you've had a big night before and you have a screaming hangover, make sure you get out early when it's a powder day. And I also, as an aside, wanted to just emphasize that in recent years, the idea that managing terrain is probably is a better way of managing risk and reducing the chances of accidents, just because it's way more certain. There's a lot less uncertainty than assessing snowpack stability. And so much so that recently, as you can see by the name of this book here, Safer Ski Touring in Norway, it's over 100 routes in Norway where you can avoid avalanche terrain altogether. And that's another really good way to just start things out and little by little work your way into adventuring into avalanche terrain as you get more experience and knowledge. Of course, Norway, it's easier to do this because the mountain ranges tend to be not quite as steep and abrupt as the Alps. So if you are going steeper, and that's what you're all thinking too, is that, is you're all good skiers and snowboarders, and there's nothing better than the steep and deep. And so just as that's where we're going to emphasize also going into the steeper areas, and the first and foremost avoiding terrain traps, because I've noticed in statistics over the last 30 years or so is that on most years about half of all bad accidents and deaths occur in places where there are steep slopes above terrain traps or in complex terrain. Complex terrain, you might have heard that term before. That's more the technical term, but it basically means steep slopes above terrain traps.
Terrain traps can make even little avalanches deadly.
So small avalanches, it makes even small avalanches deadly. And going over cliffs, it can involve going into lakes. The number of people have gotten taken into sort of streams, little rivers and lakes and things and killed is shocking to me. And also trees, while they can provide some stability, if you have a wide open meadow like this right here and there's trees below, then that they are a terrain trap as well. Within about 5 seconds, this avalanche here, it doesn't look that steep, but it's about 35 degrees. It's about like a black run steepness. They probably accelerated up to not far off 100 kilometers an hour. So you can imagine what a car looks like in those situations. That guy was that died instantly. So to give you some ideas about where you maybe can go is avoiding the steep slopes above holes. Like this is a terrain trap. And I mentioned before too, is that you, even not far from the piste, you've got to, when you're going into unsecured areas, you really need to take responsibility for your own safety. These people are lined up on a blue run, and where it's very safe, 100% safe. That's why I put the white check within the green circle there. There's nothing dangerous over there, but within about 50 meters or so, someone was killed in an avalanche on a steep slope above a terrain trap, which is a hole here. And that's really, really common in Europe, where we have lots of terrain where there's dips and things underneath. Sometimes it can be as simple as managing your itinerary, your terrain on the hoof or on the slide, I guess you would say, and avoiding these kinds of holes. It's not the majority of avalanches and avalanche accidents happen within view of a lift or a run, but a large minority of accidents and deaths happen within view of a lift or a run. And it's often little innocuous places like this right here, a little hole like that. Someone gets taken, buried, and then all of a sudden they only have a few minutes to live, 15 minutes or so. And to really emphasize this idea of terrain traps, this is a slope that I know it's right near where I live. It's in Teen. Many of you have probably seen it and perhaps even skied it before. There's lots of tracks on it, and but there's a big trench that was built below to protect the town of Teen. And there's probably been about not 10 or 12 people killed in the last 30 years or so since I've been living in the area. As I mentioned before, most of the time nothing happens. So you get in habits and people get in the habit, and then all of a sudden something does. And after one of these incidents, I was interviewed by ITV, and it's a good little quick interview, about a minute and a half, that really shows graphically what can be the consequences.
Do the authorities know yet what triggered this avalanche? What caused it to happen?
Well, at the moment, Charlotte, they're suggesting that it was someone higher up on the Lavachet wall, the big peak behind the buildings here, that triggered that, sending that wall of snow down behind the buildings. This is a popular area with Brits, as you say. Take a look. Let's speak with Henry Schniewind now, who is an avalanche and off-piste expert. And Henry, I mean, are you clear on what happened yesterday?
Pretty clear, but first I want to say it's just very sad. Less than 24 hours after the accident happened, and it's just very, very sad. Victims, our heart goes out to the victims and their families. What happened is it happens in 90-95% of all avalanche accidents. It was triggered by a person. Usually that's the person and the victim themselves or someone in their group, but there is some speculation as to that there might have been a group above and that scenario is becoming more and more common with the increased popularity of off-piste skiing over the last 10 years or so.
Now, there's a lot of people skiing this half term. There's a lot of people wanting to go off-piste to have that experience. Is it safe to do so?
Well, first of all, there is not a generalized danger everywhere. That's for sure. There is a danger. It's an isolated danger, localized as they call it, and a danger rating of 3 out of 5 scale. So I think that definitely caution is definitely advised when we go off-piste at any time. But it's certainly this accident doesn't preclude any off-piste activity or skiing activity.
So I ended this little clip here just to show you the trench where all these people are trying to dig out. It was 3 people. I think it was 3, maybe 4 people who were taken and buried. They all had transceivers on and everything, but they were buried under. I thought at first it was 2 or 3 meters, but it was not far off 10 meters apparently. So they were so deep that they had no chance whatsoever. And something I want to emphasize here also for you all is that they were with a professional. And it's really surprising how many accidents happen with professionals, and that's a point that I'd like to discuss and further with you all, Blue and Dom, during our comments and questions period. So that's the slope angles and the terrain traps, and I thought I'd throw this in here because you're probably thinking, well, if this is all about where do I start, then what do I do like to avoid that kind of situation when I want to go into avalanche terrain, and where do I start? What I do personally, and I've noticed a lot of other professionals do this, is that when I'm going steeper, we don't go into massive wide open slopes, even if the powder looks great, and even if there's been lots of other people on them. I start out with really small kind of test slopes of maybe 50 centimeters of 50 meters or so, to get an idea of what's happening. Or when there's any question in my mind, I stick away from avalanche terrain altogether. But I thought also when I showed this video, I mean this image, then you really need to emphasize what you need to do if there is someone who is buried, which is having the essential rescue equipment, and also you need to train with it. So very quickly, you need to have a transceiver, a probe, and shovel is the essential equipment, and you really need to practice with this stuff. Learning how to use these things, opening up a probe and putting it together, or even turning your transceiver onto search, which a lot of people don't know how to do, even though they bought the best equipment. It all comes through training and practice, because there's a lot of stress. Someone in your group, maybe one of your clients or family or friends, is very close to dying underneath there, and under that kind of pressure, you can really just freeze up, and the way to avoid freezing up and being efficient is practicing with this stuff. So what we looked at in here is that we looked at the framework, and to finish off with the solution part of the structure of the talk here, I just wanted to briefly to also talk about the human factors before we wind down and pass things on to Dom here. The human factors again come about mainly because we're not getting feedback from the environment, and even if we're doing something wrong, it's not like touching a red hot hob where you get burned right away. You definitely don't get burned every time you do something stupid or dangerous in avalanche terrain. So we get complacent, and we tend to get caught up into sort of traps and impulses, snap decisions that don't work. You think they could because it might work in other areas of our lives, but certainly when there's high consequences, it's not. We really can't rely on these flawed decision-making, impulsive reasons and decisions, motivators that have been shown to be the real factors why experienced people get caught up and make bad decisions. And so there's familiarity. We've been here many times before, so we kind of skip over it. Commitment to doing something, so we don't apply the key points, like maybe avoiding avalanche terrain altogether. We want to fit in with the group. The expert halo, the person sounds like they know what they're talking about. Really, they maybe don't know anything at all. And the two most deadly, I think, are these last two ones where tracks make us feel safer, and also if it's getting tracked out, we want to get in there before the slope gets tracked out. So everything else, all our better intentions and knowledge goes out the window, and because we're chasing the powder and scarcity, that's the fact that we tend to value things in proportion to the chance we might lose them. And that is exactly the kind of thing that happened in this situation here, that social proof and scarcity. So the idea is we want to replace those impulsive, flawed snap decision-making factors and replace them with the drivers, the key points that actually have an impact on accident reduction, like avoiding steep slopes above terrain traps, and not sort of saying, oh, it's okay because there's tracks over that hole or that cliff, it must be okay. And on my pocket guide that you can not only get off my website, and I've offered a discount for everybody, but I've often offered a pocket guide version of it on video. It's a 12-minute video, and I have a scale where you can help to get an idea of what danger you would be or wouldn't be taking if you're applying or not applying the points on it. So there's a scoring system in there as well, all in the view of helping you to apply. So it's not something that's perfect in terms of a perfect kind of black and white. We'll show you. I'm showing you exactly what to do and what not to do. It's helping you to apply and open the discussion amongst the group, and a complement to avalanche training. And it only also works if you're working as what I call co-pilots. I've done quite a bit of work with pilots and people in the aviation, even fighter pilots, and they remind each other all the time that it's so easy. Even the most competent experts, the best pilots, make stupid mistakes, and they count on their wingmen and their and women and co-pilots to point out things that they might be just really obvious, but they might be missing. So that's what being a co-pilot and speaking up if you think something's dangerous, and especially in these times of bliss when we're having such a great day on Bluebird Day and great powder, and asking ourselves at the bottom of each slope, are we good or were we just lucky? And this is the Avalanche Review, the American review for it's the American Avalanche Association review, and it's like I said at the beginning of the talk, and I'm going to wind it down now by saying you'll never, ever, ever not be vulnerable to making stupid mistakes. I tell people I just try to be less stupid. That's the best I can do. So where do I start has been the theme of the talk, and I focused on three of the key points in my framework, which are the ones that have the most impact: the slope angles, the 30-degree threshold terrain traps, the essential rescue equipment, and training with all of that. And then as a transition into Dom's part of the presentation, I thought I would just take a quote from a surgical safety group that I was working with on something called never events. That's when the very rare events but happen and have terrible consequences. Even the wrong limb has been amputated before by very intelligent people doing the wrong thing. And what we want to do is prevent. And putting all of these things together, patient safety is not just about checklists, human factors, or teamwork. It's about checklists and human factors and teamwork and many other things beside. Of course, surgery isn't just about those things. Avalanches aren't just about checklists and human factors and teamwork. And we have Dom here from his company, and he's going to show us a much broader view of things and how much more there is to learn, and that you should be learning with Wee Mountain. So I'll pass it over to you, Dom. Are you ready to rock and roll? I think you're still on mute there. Oh, there we go.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Henry. It was
okay.
Really nice.
I'm gonna
Good
stop.
evening, everybody.
I'm gonna stop my share.
Yeah, I will start sharing mine. Okay. I think you must have it now, right? Do you have
We got
the
it.
screen? Yes.
We
So
have
thank
it.
you so much, Blue and Henry, for the invitation. Good evening, everybody. As Henry said, the winter has started, and we have fantastic conditions right now. So Henry did a great job explaining three important key points. But mountain safety is a lifelong process. And I would like to go a little bit wider. Why is education so important? It's also important for yourself, for sure, to be safe. It's important for our kids and for the next generation. I think there is a lot to do to improve safety on the mountain. So I'm Dominique Perret. I'm born in Switzerland. I was born with a passion for skiing, but also for freedom, and I've built my life around skiing, and it gave me more than I've ever expected. Since I'm a kid, freeriding was my way of life, and I was very fortunate, I had a privilege. I could discover the white planet. So from the Alps to Alaska to Canada, Patagonia to the Himalayas, north face of Mount Everest. It was 28 seasons as a pro. Um, I'm a little bit like a godfather of the new freeriding. But at the end of my career, I realized I lost 30 friends, okay? Almost one friend every winter. So that was just crazy. Something was wrong. So at the same time, in the last 3 decades, the outdoor movement exploded. Everybody wanted to go outdoor. It's very fashionable today, especially after COVID. People, they want to reconnect with themselves, reconnect with nature. And I completely understand that craze. And this is why, for me, something was wrong. And I wanted to do something different. The industry was booming, and I noticed something was really missing. Education was generally pretty weak. Of course, you had people like Henry doing great job, and you had some ski school somewhere, some mountain school, but it was not sufficient. And this is why I created the We Mountain. And the we is really important. I want to create a community of responsible people to make the mountain safer. The idea is also to share, best practice, because Henry is doing a great job over there. People are doing an amazing job in Canada, in Alaska, and the Alps, but we need to work together. And as you know, mountain people are not very easy to put together, right? Um, so what we see the 21st century mountain, participants are increasing. Equipment has evolved like crazy, but also the environment have changed, global warming and so on. But the risk did not change. So the risk stays the same, or even worse in the mountain. So I wanted to bring something new, something different. Just a few numbers for you to understand, because the backcountry skiing market is big. It's 7 million people worldwide. It's about 3 million in the Alps. And people are buying equipment. Um, I don't call it safety equipment. I call it rescue equipment. And I'm very happy that Henry also call it rescue equipment. Well, this is really important. So as you can see, only in Europe, every winter, it's about 100,000 people who buy a rescue kit, and about 40,000 now buying airbags. And most of the time, they don't know how to use it, and they don't know how not to use it. I don't want to kill the vibe, but I would like to go through some numbers for you to understand that it's a serious thing. As Henry said before, 90% of avalanche are triggered by the victim or the member of the group. So it's not a twist of fate. It's not bad luck. It's bad decision making. And thanks to education, we can really make a difference. Just to let you know, there's every winter about 100 people, 100 would die in Europe, in the Alps. It's about 24 in Switzerland, about the same in France, Austria, Italy, and Germany. So imagine all these lives. I mean, it is nuts. For a hobby sport, it's completely crazy. I think we can do much better. And now, what is even more frightening is non-fatal backcountry skiing accident increased by 220%. So people are not dead, okay, but let me tell you, then, I mean, that young girl was so happy on the video of Henry. People are in really bad shape. Normally, it's polytraumatized. I mean, it's just getting nuts. Another number I would like to share with you, and you will see it's important. Only in Switzerland, the cost per winter is almost 300 million Swiss francs. So it's just going ballistic. So yes, I love to see the industry growing. Yes, I love to see the sports growing, but now it's a toll. And this is what I want to share with you. I think as a community, we have to act today. We really have to act because skiers, most of the time, they have a pretty negative image. If you look at the news, at the newspapers, we are idiots. We had nothing to do there. We're taking risks. We're putting people in danger. So I think really we have a threat of more regulation and more bannings. And I love freedom. You love freedom. We don't want that. We want to keep our vital space of freedom. This is so important. And therefore, we need to get more education. We speak a lot with the industry because for many, many years, the industry has been pretty irresponsible, selling product, ski ticket, blah, blah, blah. And mostly the message was good luck, buy my thing and good luck. They were not very active in education. I'll give you an example here. If you look at scuba diving, free falling, parapenting, kite surfing, all these sports have pretty good certification system. Even if you want to play golf, you have to go through some learning before you go hit the ball on the green. But I don't know why skiing is so weak. You can buy all the equipment and off you go. Not only you put yourself in danger, but you are going to put other people in danger. So the goal with We Mountain is to take We Mountain on that slide and within a few years to say skiing is finally well educated, responsible, and more safe. We have a goal. It's called 33-33 by 2033 to reduce accident by 33%. And this is something we want to achieve. And also with you guys, the young instructors, the practitioners, people like Henry and Blue, we want to work together to get there. How do we do it? And what is the receipt with We Mountain? Of course, it's education. And again, people like Henry are doing tremendous job. But we're talking about 7 million people worldwide, 3 million in Europe. So we need technology. We need to do something different. By group of 8, it will take ages. So thanks to technology, we can do online courses. And our solution is that you can start online on your own pace, at your own rhythm, do the course, do the certification, and then step 2, you go see the mountain guides or the ski school. And it's a very, very good system. And that way you also avoid the beginner's mistake. Because as Henry said also, in the mountain you pay cash. I mean, there is no credit. A slight mistake, you can be dead. So by learning online, you can save a lot of bad experience. Easy system, multi-language system in French and English. And it's an international method. I will come back to that, very important. All the content is verified by experts. And we have put together 30 almost 40 experts from Switzerland, England, Europe, USA, Canada, New Zealand, because we believe in collective intelligence. We want to work together. We have sports psychologists, doctors, nutritionists, meteorologists, snow specialists, mountain rescue, and also universities. So we really put up an amazing level of competences. It's one thing I really want to emphasize, that gear is good, of course, but knowledge is really your only safety tool. It's your brain. You got to learn how to use your rescue gear, of course, but the more important, how to learn to never to have to take it out. Every time you take it out, there is a drama. And again, it is not a safety tool. It's not a safety kit. This is bullshit. It is a rescue kit, or an airbag is an emergency kit. So don't take that for safety. And I see too many people, I see too many young kids saying, oh, I have my safety thing. No, doesn't work. I had a mom the other day. She called us at the company and she said she wanted to buy anti-avalanche bag. And I said, okay, if you can find an anti-avalanche bag, you have to buy 1,000 and you'll be a billionaire. That doesn't exist. It's just an airbag, and you don't want to pull the handle for sure. So please keep that in mind. So riders must constantly learn, that for sure, and relearn. There is an art of observation, and most of the time you have all the information under your eyes. You just need to learn how to observe, which takes time, but you don't need fancy tools, you don't need fancy technology. If you teach, you can find so many information just by observing. So Henry went through three major points, and I think it was really interesting. But we've been sitting together with these experts, and after 30 years of pro free riding, I had my method, and I found that you need to know, if you really want to be safe, you need to know minimal 25 of these elements. So we started putting them together, and naming them. And it's quite a lot of things, right? So we decided to reorganize everything because it was a bit complex. So the idea was to reorganize everything under the human factors. It's a very holistic approach, and also about the environment. So about the environment, it's pretty classical, You will learn the weather, visibility, temperature, and wind, very important. You will learn also the terrain, slope aspect, like Henry said many times, and slope incline also, the 30, 35 degrees. You will learn a little bit of snow science, precipitation, kind of snowpack, avalanche activity. And sometimes also, depending on the wildlife or the vegetation, this will change your plan. So you need to know a little bit about sustainability. And where we put a lot of effort is about the human factors. Again, 90% of the avalanche are triggered by the victim or a member of the group. So again, it is bad decision making, so it comes from the human. So we spend a lot of time about the mental, motivations, emotion, perception, management strategy, to avoid the heuristics. We spend a lot of time also about the energy, nutrition, hydration, and sleep. Again, if you're dehydrated, you won't take good decision. If you lack of sleep, you won't take good decision. So you need to know all these elements. Also, your medical condition, an old injury, sometimes your knee hurts or your hips, you're going to change your plan. So be careful about that. And also the gear. And it's very important to have good gear. If you're too warm, maybe you're not going to take good decision. If you're too cold, you're not going to take good decision. If you have bad goggles or even a bad ski pole, just a bad basket, sometimes it drives you completely nuts and you start changing your plans. So what we want to show is all these little details make a big difference. An avalanche, most of the time, is never one big mistake. It's always small details all together that make a bad decision. So for us, your mountain safety is a sum of your choices. And this is really important to have all these choices. And with the risk management, you have all this data. So you need quality data. You need to be able to name them and to quantify them. So again, it takes time. It's a long life process. And then you will have green light, red light, and so on. But it's a very complex thing, you know, it's not that easy. So with our system, I think it makes the decision easier. What we have seen also, I go back to that slide, we have seen that all the environmental elements are pretty well measured. Weather, terrain, snow, you have numbers, you have data. But for the human factors, it's very difficult to measure. So we developed a system, it's called Mountaineering Self-Assessment. You have 60 affirmations, and you will have like a cockpit with your mental state, energy state, and medical state. So now you have very good quality data, very well measured, and this really helps to take good decisions. And I will be soon to the end, but I would like to show you also our teaching system, what you're going to learn with us. So it's a three segment teaching. It's avoid, react, and rescue. Avoid is 80% of the course. We will teach you to stay in your comfort, fun, and safety zone. That's super important. Then we also teach you how to react in case of an accident. It's a very short time, but sometimes it can save your life right there. And then it's a rescue. It's more classical. And a lot of people are telling me, oh, yeah, but I did an avalanche course. But actually, they did a rescue course, which is the searching, the probing, digging, first aid, communication, and legal system. So here you can see that a rescue course is a good course. I would encourage everybody to do it, but you're missing 90% of the process. So what you're going to learn with us is out knowing yourself, knowing the environment, that's a ABCD, that's a base. And then what are the risk factors, human risk factors? What are the natural risk factors? Now you start putting things together, you know, you start making small words. And then that's a specific terrain features, the terrain trap, how to recognize the favorable ones and unfavorable ones. So it's really important. And Henry was really right about that. He called them terrain traps. We call them specific terrain features. They are really, really important to know. Then we have the additional sources of information. This is like the avalanche bulletin, local information, weather forecast. I think this should help you to make your decision, but this should not be on the front. This is not the tool you use to make a decision. This comes afterwards, after your observation, after you first analyze, then you have these additional sources to help you. And then how to make a decision. Should I go back? And also, if I decide to go back, you have to decide early enough when you have choices. You know, I see a lot of people, they want to turn back, but it's too late. They have no more choice. So you can also learn when to make the good decision. So this is avoid, and that's where you want to stay. That's a fun part. That's a skiing we love. And if something happens, we will also teach you how to react if you're taken in an avalanche, or for example, to use the airbag, because a lot of people, they have an airbag, they have no idea. I still hear people saying you have to swim. No, please don't swim. This is completely wrong. This is the worst advice we can give you, so we can teach you how to do it. It's more like the canyoning when you go on the river, feet first, all together, but never go head first and swimming. This is a very bad advice. So this is our system that you're going to learn with us. And I will finish with that because to me it's the most important thing, you know. Education has very positive impact. Of course, on the individuals, saving lives, reducing accident, that's pretty obvious. It also has an impact on protecting the environment and being responsible, you know, taking care of the nature, of the fauna, of the flora, very important, how to travel, the food, you know, the waste, and so on. But on top of that, and to me, it's maybe one of the most important is about the society to save our space of freedom for us, but for our kids. I think it's so important that we understand if we want that freedom, that beautiful powder, we need to be responsible. And today, you know, I see a lot of people, they have no idea what they're doing, and we need to change that. So education is more fun, more safety, more freedom. And we want to make it sexy, you know. We want to make it sexy to be smart and not to be the jury on the mountain. So, Blue, thank you so much for this opportunity. And we would like to thank you guys. We made a special offer for you. You can flash the QR code if you want, and you're going to have a 30% discount on the course. And yeah, I hope you're going to love it. And I wish you a very good and safe winter. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, both of you guys. That was absolutely brilliant. Really, really interesting. Lots of new stuff for me and a great reminder. Let's just quickly do the CPD admin for our guys. What we'd like you to do, if you are here and want this to count as your IASI CPD for a year, can you write in the chat, give your full name and answer the questions that Dominique and Henry are going to ask you, and then we'll use that as a kind of confirmation that you attended and paid attention. Over to you guys. What was the question again?
Do you want to start, Henry?
I'm happy to start with it was when accidents happen, how is the avalanche occurring? When accidents happen, is it happening just spontaneously, an avalanche coming out of the sort of traditionally we think that an avalanche comes out of kind of just out of this down out of the slope randomly? Or how do accidents happen with avalanches? I think there's already been one correct answer there.
Good work, guys. You've obviously been paying attention.
Yeah. Thank you all for paying attention then.
Cool. Ooh. Okay, guys. Whoops, I had it on everything.
Yeah.
On everyone. Brilliant.
Our team, and we didn't really emphasize too much the avalanches being triggered from people above in recent years. I don't know if you've seen that in the statistics, Dom, as well, that's another area, and you've emphasized very importantly and wisely the irresponsible behavior of people in the last decade or so, the way that they're just going willy-nilly all over the place and then setting off avalanches on other people.
Sorry, was that a question to Dominique?
Well, it was just an addition, and then wondering, yeah, I did ask you, Dominique, if you found that as well as being a problem.
Yeah, I mean, we see that a lot today. As you know, Verbier is my home resort, and we see a lot of people, you know, cutting above you, not respecting the distances, they not respecting the rule of thumbs of distance, spacing, timing. Yes, very simple thing for you know, a skier with experience, but it's getting very annoying when you see this kind of circus, you know. So this is what we would like to change, you know, because it's very easy, and most of the people, I would say, it's not because they're stupid, they just don't know. Nobody told them before, and I'm sure they're keen to learn, but they just need to find easy information, that the information is coming to them instead of going to search the information. So I
Yeah.
think it's, yeah, people are keen to learn, you know. Yeah.
So if anyone has any questions, pop them in the chat. And if it gets very involved, I can sort of turn on your audio and allow you to speak. But I think let's just start it off with if anyone's got any questions, yeah, just type them out, and these guys would be very happy to answer them. Have you been in a anything pretty scary yourself, Dominique, or have you managed to avoid too much yourself?
No, I managed to avoid quite a lot. I've never been caught in a real avalanche. So, yes, it's part of luck for sure. Also, yeah, I was very cautious, but there's a part of luck for sure. I triggered quite big ones, yes. But no, 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 fortunately, nothing. But again, I've been, searching people, rescuing some people, but also I found some, dead bodies. And I mean, you go from your best day of your life to the worst day of your life in a split of a second. It's really ugly because you have this beautiful day, powder up to your, to your knees, and it's fantastic. And suddenly something happened, and it's really the worst day of your life. That's why I really want to tell everybody to avoid and really to learn that part. Um, Rescue gear is rescue gear. Yes, you need to know how to use it, but don't count on that. It's
The best rescue technique is prevention, and that's I very much want to emphasize also what Dominique is saying, because I know that most of the talks I give, I'll give about 80% me too, or 90% is on prevention, and that the questions that I get at the end are almost, well, perhaps not 80 or 90% on equipment, rescue equipment, but at least half of the questions are on rescue equipment.
yeah,
And it would be nice that people really focused on the prevention side of things.
yeah. I love the way I like the way you say it, Henry. You call it rescue equipment. I know you work a lot with the industry, but still many brands are calling that safety equipment. And I think that's a big mistake they do. To me, the only safety tool you have is your brain, and you can muscle up your brain, you can train your brain, and yeah, education is the only safety you can find. Yeah.
Great. Well,
There's a
should we
good
start?
question I
Yeah.
see there. Um, the piste, can you assume that you're safe from avalanche while skiing on the piste? With asking that. Yes, I would say that the resorts are doing an amazing job in Europe. I mean, a fantastic job, bombing the place, making the place safe. And I would say, yes, 1000% safe on the slopes. It's very rare. There is an accident on the slopes. But as soon as you go off the slopes, and the slides from Henry was very to the point. As soon as you go maybe 5 meters, 10 meters off the piste, it can be an avalanche prone place. Yes, that is really important to know.
Yes, because those areas, and I didn't mention it in my part of the talk, Dom, but it's I think it's important for everybody to know that the local authorities, the local town or commune, as they say in French, they're only responsible for securing the piste from avalanches. As soon as you go even 1 centimeter next to the piste, in theory, the commune or the town is not responsible for your safety. And that's why I emphasized about, I don't know, 20 times, you need to take responsibility for your own safety, even as soon as you leave the slope. And I will add in just one North American thing. In North America, I agree 100% with what Dom said about safe on the piste. When you go into North America, you can go off the piste, inbounds where it's quote unquote secure. But in recent years, yes, it's very, very rare. But there have been people taken when they are skiing off of the trails, but within bounds where in theory it's safe. But there's been accidents, and I have one friend actually who this happened to in Idaho, and he was buried in bounds in a supposedly secure area, and I can just hear him in the in my head right now saying, "I always wear a transceiver or a beacon now, even even in bounds." But that's an American North American um, kind of subtle difference.
Yeah. I see a question about the Wii mountain courses given by ASI Mountain Safety L1 or L2. So not for the moment. We just started a cooperation with ASI, and I hope in the future, we can teach your instructors, and they can be teaching our courses. Thank you, Blue, for this opportunity. Maybe you can answer that question for the future.
Yeah, so I don't, so no, because at this stage at least anyway, because of the practical element, but it's very likely, well, not very, it's definitely a possibility that it could be counted as CPD or something like that. It's something we need to look into, and I'm very keen on doing that with Dom going forward.
And I saw a question to me that's interesting and very quick answer from Ian Fleming. Just wondering how avalanches get triggered from below. And that was going to be one of the key points in my in-depth talk on triggering in January, where I present my interpretation that I've worked very closely with a physicist, snow scientist, and engineer who've come up with a four-step triggering model, and that's what I'll show, at least according to that model and what I've seen personally on the mountain. That's how avalanches are triggered from below.
More news on that second webinar very soon, by the way, everybody.
Same thing with the one about the avalanche accidents in Europe. Some insights into the potential causes and what people could do to avoid it. I'll give my point of view and then give Dom a second to give his point of view too. But there's something that's called a persistent weak layer. I think someone referred to it as permafrost there. It's something that develops off very often in early season snowpacks, and it's a very sugary layer of snow that has very little cohesion and makes the snowpack very fragile. And I believe that's the same thing, at least in the northern French Alps and surrounding areas, even into the area of Verbier and Stubai, I think, in Austria. So that is in very short and simple answer, oversimplified, and I get into that also in my in-depth talk in January about weak layers.
One thing we can add maybe about the weak layers, if you in the Alps, in the northern hemisphere, if you ski the north face, the weak layers, they stay longer because you don't have, the warm, the cold, the warm, the cold that would transform the snow. So this is also a factor why you have more avalanches on the north facing because there's less dynamics in the snowpack.
That's according to what I know and have studied for decades. That's exactly what's happening, and I am all shocked at times with especially locals who will say that not especially locals, but including locals and the large part of the general public will. There's a myth out there that it's because of the melting and freezing that there is instability. It's the exact opposite, as Dom was saying. Melting and freezing helps to make it stable. And that's why in the south-ish facing slopes, generally, well, he already said, I'm not going to repeat what Dom said. That's why in the north-facing slopes, there's more instability and it lasts longer. And definitely the reason why there's more accidents there. One of the primary reasons anyway, along with this great snow there too.
Yeah.
I'd love you guys to answer the question about do you find Irish and English skiers are very anti-transceiver, or do you find differences between different nationalities in terms of their attitudes to avalanche risk and safety learning and
Go
equipment?
for it, Dom.
No, I would say like with We Mountain, we have a lot of ski clients, from Ireland, from UK, and I would say they are keen to learn. They love to learn. They love to go through a system and to have certification, which is different in France. I would say France is something really different. People love to improvise, and they don't have the same curiosity for learning. So I would say the Anglo-Saxon people, or Irish, English, or Scottish people are more, I would say, yeah, more educated, more disciplined skiers. I would put it that way. Do you see that, Henry?
Yeah, more or less. And I would just go further to say that I don't think there's an aversion to the transceivers. However, there is an aversion. It's slowly changing to carrying the probe and the shovel. And I constantly feel I need to remind people that the probe and the shovel is not for you; it's for your mate. And if you're buried and your team doesn't have a probe and a shovel, they're going to take it's going to take what could take 10 minutes to get you out, probably an hour or more, because digging with your hands is really difficult, and locating someone, even with the transceivers that are very, very precise, you need to have the probe and the shovel, and it's very selfish not to take them with you. So I would say that there's a bit of an aversion to that.
Okay.
Thing. I've got quite an interesting specific question from Joey O. We've already seen a number of avalanches in Europe this season already. Could you give an insight into the potential causes and what people could have done to avoid it?
Well, I alluded to that earlier when I said that there's a weak layer that has developed, and there's a couple questions that are sort of within that category, Blue. So it's not only an early season snowpack situation, but there is a weak layer, especially in north-facing slopes, and that Dom pointed out. And you can find out about this in reading the avalanche bulletins. They'll mention a persistent weak layer. And when you talk about persistent weak layers, that's when it's starting to get into this realm of something that's more long term, rather more long term than a temporary weak layer. And avoiding it is, well, is making the decision about going into avalanche terrain or not avalanche terrain, and being aware that on the steeper slopes it can be triggered. And also that's what Dom was talking about in his courses, going into more detail than I did. My framework is a complement to the things like Dom is probably going to mention right now about how to avoid it.
No, no. What I would add to that, so to me, it's more the human factor also. The powder fever, it's beginning of the season. It's a commitment. To me, it's exactly the commitment errors. All these young people, they see 1 meter of snow, first day of skiing, everybody on the social network, Instagram, and you just get into the game. It's your first day of skiing, and you forget all your rules and everything, and the emotions are taking over. So for me, you have the snow problem for sure. It's the beginning of the season. You had ice and everything. But the main problem for me was really the commitment, human factors, the powder fever.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think where that shows up in the facts is that if you look at seasons where there's widespread permanent weak layer problems throughout the entire season, you'll see that the statistics will skyrocket. There'll be huge anomalous spikes in the numbers of deaths throughout Europe. Dom mentioned there's 100 people a year. That's an average each year in Europe. Some years, like when there was lots and lots of rain and not tons of snow a couple of years ago, there was about 50 or 60 people killed in Europe. But in 2015, I remember, and another year more recently, I can't remember exactly what it was. There was 190 people or 180 people killed in avalanches in Europe. And it's very much exactly what Dom is saying. The human factors, people just going out as if they've always have been, how they did last year or the year before. This goes for professionals as well. But they're not taking into account that the environment around them, even though it looks the same, it has changed. And that does come out in the avalanche forecasts.
Yeah. And also, next to the ski resort, the more things are skied, also the better is the stability. In the beginning of the season, the layers are not very well bonded together. And after, few weeks of skiing and everything, you have kind of moguls, better cohesion. So it's get a little bit more stable around the piste also.
Yeah, and the classic off-piste runs,
Yeah.
in English, generally we refer to that as skier compaction, and that's a lot of professionals I noticed get into serious, very basic, huge accidents due to some very basic bad decisions early season in December. For that very reason, as Don pointed out, the skier compaction, we're not talking about um, when a slope has been skied out by everybody. It's not hundreds, but thousands and thousands of people skiing on the piste or on the classic off-piste runs over a period of time, so that when you get a new snowfall on top of that, what's underneath has been really, really packed down. And that makes it that there's a huge difference between skier compacted areas and not skier compacted areas. And so becomes problematic in a human factor way early in the season, when like right now when things aren't very compact, but also when people venture out just beyond where it's been skier compacted.
We've had a couple of questions about could we see the code again, Dom? Would you be able to pop that up?
Yes,
Um,
yes, I was listening to Henry's story. So
no, no, not at all. But
there,
and we can carry on
um,
chatting while it's on the screen.
there-
Um, what about the question from Femke about respecting distance criteria, spacing? Could we have a bit more explanation or specific factors?
do you have it now?
Yeah, got it. Thanks. You can
Did,
also use the code for everybody, just so you know, as well as
I
the
will be.
QR
I
code.
heard the question there briefly, and did you hear, Dom, when you mentioned about the spacing and distances? What were
Yes.
you clarifying about that? I think.
Yeah, but again, it's very difficult because each and every run will require different spacing, depending if it's a wide open space, if it's a narrow couloir. But again, you don't want to add more weight. You want to be light. Sometimes you have to go from one safety island to the next safety island. So um, you have to learn how to do it, but I would never tell you have to be 15 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters, because sometimes 30 meters will be nothing, and sometimes 15 meters will be enough. So it really depends on each location and each scenario. But what I would say, maintain the spacing. Also, always establish a gathering point before setting off, always knowing where you want to go, to stop. Always check the person following you. If he's safe, he's fine, if he's right, before going too far. Um, I would say most experienced member lead the group for sure. You want to have the most experience on the front. Um, yeah. Also one thing to slow down when you approach some other people, because sometimes you see people just approaching you at full speed and they stop above you, always stop underneath the group with a lower speed. Um, yes, these little things that can really help. We were talking about the forest. Also, when you ski in the forest, we use a buddy system. Always ski with a buddy and have like, a hoo-hoo, like you answer to the people. So you know the spacing is right. You know if your buddy is safe, is good. If you don't hear your buddy, you can stop and see if something is wrong. But all these things, you can learn them, It's, yeah, but there is not like one distance. It always depends on the mountain you are on. Yeah.
There's a related question actually just come in. Is there an ideal number of people to go off-piste
Hmm.
in a group?
That's a very good one.
I try to limit it at about 6 people. I know when I'm guiding off piste, I'll be leading with 6 people maximum generally. But then again, like the distances, what Dom was saying, it can differ. I mean, in spring skiing, when you have the melting and freezing, much more predictable than the winter conditions, much more predictable. Sometimes I'll go out with 7 or 8 people, but then you get into the ambiance thing and being responsible that Dom really touched on, I think, quite well, is that we want to have a nice experience out there. And if you have too many people, then it gets, it gets to be like a crowd and it gets crowded. And so for me, I think ideally it's 4 people, but maybe
Yeah.
4 to 6, because then especially if you have one or two, if you have 2 people, then if you're both buried, then you're kind of screwed. What
But
do you say?
also, I agree with you, Henry. Also, with more people, the communication is more difficult because
Yeah,
of the spacing. The last one can be few, tens of meters, hundreds of meters away. So it's getting more difficult with the communication. If you have a little bit of wind or a little bit of snow, then 5 or 6 people is quite complicated to deal with. So I agree, 3, 4 people, sometimes five is a good group to ski together. To teach people, our mountain guides and ski teacher, they go maximum to 8. It's almost impossible to teach a group above 8 people. It's too slow, it's too complicated. And sometimes the level are not the same. So you might have, advanced skier and a medium skier. So it becomes really complicated.
Shall we
yeah.
do two more questions? We're just sort of reaching the end of our time. Um, do you guys want to choose the one each that you'd like to answer of the last few?
Maybe you choose one, Blue.
Yeah.
For you.
Yes.
Okay. What about? Okay, let's do the airbag question. With airbags, do you see any disadvantages using battery versus gas deployment systems? Nice specific one.
Well, I'll go. Dom was pausing there, but I'm going to take this as an opportunity also to emphasize. I think it was really important about. I think I've already emphasized it was when Dom was mentioning about all of the myths about airbags and myths about safety equipment, which is rescue equipment. It should be called that. And I'll emphasize again, the best rescue technique is prevention. But to get to the very specific point, airbags. Well, first of all, did you notice that like on my essential rescue equipment, I don't have airbags on there. That's not. It's endorsed by the international safety community generally because it is the best way to survive an avalanche if you're in it, but that means you haven't prevented it. But it is not set down as like one of the key things that you're supposed to have. Number one, and there's also a lot of evidence that there's some risk compensation involved with it too, meaning that you're more prone to take risks with the airbag, more so than if you just have the transceiver. So you got to use these things very, very carefully. I don't wear an airbag all the time, and sometimes just to play a game with myself, because as I've said, you're always vulnerable to these human factors. I don't wear an airbag on a danger level of 4, for example, because my main concentration there is avoiding avalanche terrain. And I just know how much I love off-piste, and if I'm with people, I know that my unconscious motivations are can be stronger than me. And so coming down to the batteries versus the gas deployment, Dom mentioned also practice is something that's important with the airbags. And because non-deployment, even if you're in an avalanche, has been a problem, like meaning that people just get like the deer in the headlights, they don't pull. And so the best way to do that is practice. And so what I'm getting at, and I know that I'm sort of working my way towards the answer, I think the battery ones are much more advantageous now that they're almost as light or just as light as the canisters, because you can practice the best ones. You can practice with them. You can deploy them like 50 or 60 times in their life. That's what the manufacturers are recommending, and that's on the conservative side. And they're not as difficult to repack. You don't have to replace the canisters. And then there's other practical things like there's no issues really with airplanes, getting them in the airports and stuff. What would you add to that, or disagree with, Tom?
No, 100% with you, Henry. Again, it's an emergency equipment, should not be used. I'm for the battery airbag, exactly for what you said. You can train, and I promise you, it's not easy to find the handle and to pull. It's not easy at all, so it's good to train. You can repack it. And also, if you go out, let's say for the haute route, maybe you go out for 3 or 4 days. Maybe you get very lucky and lucky the first day, and you have to pull the first day or the second day. You still have an airbag for the rest of the tour for the next days, and you don't have to. Nobody's going to carry extra cans. So with an electric airbag, you have more bullets in your gun. But yeah, you don't want to shoot any bullet. But if something happens, you have an extra chance to pull the handle.
Okay. I think there's only a couple that we haven't gone through. So let's do, so for the Pier Francesco, we'll send more information about the course in January out to all IASI members. Are there differences in avalanches between Europe and North America?
Yeah, someone directed that to me. That was what I was thinking of. I don't. Well, when you're talking about the North America, well, it's the same in Europe too, but it's maybe even more different, maybe even larger differences in America. You have different climates. So you have maritime climates. Maritime climates are more humid. There's more snow. But funnily enough, less accidents generally in maritime climates because you don't have the really, really cold temperatures and the thin snowpack, which leads to the types of weak layers that we've been discussing. And it's more of a continental climates. One thing I will say is, and this is getting kind of technical. So for those of you who have done like snow science before or a bit of that subject, there tends to be more of a weak layer problem with surface hoar in North America than in Europe, and I think it's probably because there's more trees around, and there's more of a protected environment. I've seen a lot of surface hoar
Whistler.
around in Europe, but I think with the wind and the really rough environment above tree line, those things get wiped out. They're very delicate. And if there and so there's almost all avalanche accidents in Europe that I have known about and researched have something to do with a pretty serious persistent weak layer, or at least a fairly serious temporary weak layer due to faceted grains, which come about due to temperature gradient metamorphosis within the snowpack rather than the surface hoar that comes down like frozen dew on top, and then snow comes down on top of that. Because it is in North America, you see time and fairly often the culprit in the accident, rather other than it being triggered by the victim, was a weak layer of surface hoar. And yeah, what's your observations on that, Dom?
No, I would say as soon as you're on a coastal range, like British Columbia, if you ski around Whistler, and when you have the sea, again, same thing. When you have humidity, you have ore. Same some places in Alaska when you have this, and probably same. I would not say it's North American. I would say it's close to the coastal ranges where you can find this ore
The
and
surface hoar.
yeah, surface ore. Yes,
Yeah, because the other is the depth hoar, the faceted grain.
no, the surface ore. Yes.
Yeah.
And that can be a problem. But I would say it's always you can ski in the US or in Europe. I mean, you have to think the same way. I mean, you
Yeah.
have to be very, very careful the same way. nothing that is very stable.
Yeah, and I think my answer also is my experience. I did most of my snow science work in a continental environment in Montana, in Bozeman, Montana, and I have not spent a lot of time in maritime climates like Alaska, other than mountaineering there a little bit, and so that's maybe one of the issues. But and I think most of the accidents in Europe, Dom, I think they really are tend to be away from the maritime climates. I mean, you hear about Scotland once in a while, maybe near, and we don't have really a lot of maritime climates in
No,
Europe. So maybe
no,
that's one of the reasons why there's not such a surface ore problem.
exactly.
Okay.
I would guess so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Clouds have time to dry up by the time they get on the Alps and around. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Okay, guys, I think we're going to call it for now. Thank you both so much. That was absolutely brilliant, as lots of people have already added in the chat. So huge thanks from me, from IASI as a whole. And yeah, very much looking forward to, continuing to work with you guys going forward.
Great. Thank you. And thank you everyone in the audience for your attention. This has been quite a long session with tons of information, and I really appreciate looks like by the attendance and the questions that people have really been keen and concentrating and taking what we've said to heart. So I think everybody's doing their continuing
Professional development.
professional development
Oh,
should
Susie
probably
got her
pass.
hand up. Oh, can you put, oh, where's she gone? Oh, she's gone. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to call it a day. Speak
Thank
soon.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks,
Bye,
Blue, and
everyone.
thanks to everyone in the IAZ. Have a great winter. Have
Have a
fun, be
great and
safe.
safe winter. Yes, well
And
said,
thank you,
Emily.
Dom.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye-bye.